name's Erin. I have a YouTube channel and a blog called The Impatient Gardener, and I'm delighted to be here on Linda's channel today showing you around my garden. So I live in southeastern Wisconsin, which is zone 5B. We're very close to the shores of Lake Michigan, so we really have a microclimate going on here, and the lake dictates most of our weather in terms of temperature, at least. So we live on an acre and a third, about 2/3 of which is sort of cultivated. And I'm just going to walk you around my gardens, and you'll see what it's all about here. So this garden that we're at right now is not normally where I would start a garden tour. In fact, most of my garden tours that I do on my channel, I start in what I consider to be sort of the heart of the garden, which is kind of near the house. But if you were coming to my house, and since many of you are going to be seeing me for the first time, I thought, why not show you the garden the way you would see if you were coming over to my house for a visit? So we're right here at the entrance to our driveway, and the garden that we see over here is all new last year, and we're going to walk through the middle of this, but part of why I designed this was to be kind of an interesting entrance to our property. Before, this was just, well, we used to have many trees here. We've been here for 19 years now, and then last year I sort of turned this into a sort of more naturalistic garden. Okay, now we're going to head over to closer to the house, and then we'll take the tour from. So this is a garden that I made a few years ago, and it's just on the other side of our driveway. And the only plants that are in it are dwarf Alberta spruces, pagoda dogwoods in the middle, and then this is Japanese forest grass, Echinacea macra, which is the straight green one, and I love it. This is where I also had boxwoods in here, and those actually had boxwood blight. I found out this year that the boxwoods I had here had boxwood blight, and so I had to remove those. But I have boxwoods elsewhere in my garden, and I've been practicing, been following really good hygiene as far as boxwood goes, so I'm hoping that the rest of the boxwood in my garden can be spared from that. All right, so now we're going to head over by the house. Come on. So we garden with two dogs, and this is one of them. That's Odin. So this is our front door, and these two pots in this part of our driveway actually both have pagoda dogwoods in them. For years I grew other things in these pots, and then last year I changed them out for these pagoda dogwoods, and I couldn't be happier with the change. I love the form of pagoda dogwoods. That nice tiered branching is so nice. I do have a few things left to plant on the front porch here. But off to the side is what I call the circle garden. Now, I am sort of the belief that life is too short to just have one gardening style. So I am all over the place in terms of my garden style. And this is kind of an interesting experiment I did where I sort of mixed a formal shape and form with sort of loose planting. The hedge you see here is all chives. This was made from 2 bunches of chives that I got, and over the years just kept dividing them. About as soon as this video is done, I'm going to cut them back. I cut them back 2 or 3 times a year, and then they flush back just beautifully. They're especially beautiful when they are in flower, but they get a little straggly looking, so I cut them all back, and within 2 weeks they're looking great again. Each segment in this garden is a little different. I plant 3 mass plantings of things in here. So for instance, here I've got one of my absolute favorite flowers. This is Nicotiana lime green, which I grow from seed. Each segment has a boxwood in a pot in it. And here I've got some dahlias growing. And then in the front, I've got just white profusion zinnias. Getting going here. And then of course I've got this I guess this is a tutor, not an obelisk, which I've been calling it that, which hosts several different varieties, at least 3, if not 4, of Clematis in here, which Clematis is one of my very favorite plants, so you can't really go wrong with that. So my first gardening love was container gardening, so I do a lot of containers, and I love making containers. And this year, this is my sort of wild and crazy container. Because our front door is set up quite high, I always feel like I need height here. And so this year that's coming in the form of some extremely healthy cup and saucer vine that I started from seed this winter. I do grow a lot of annuals from seed. And then I filled in with all sorts of things, including a tall Angelonia, some Gara, Helichrysum, a little bit of verbena down here, some purple heart, Transcantia. So it's just sort of, sometimes I like things to be a little bit looser and a little bit more out there, and certainly this one fits that bill. I have a little Clematis. I've got Clematis all over the place. They grow up a variety of structures, trees, shrubs, you name it. But this one is just kind of climbs up the railing there, comes around from the other side of the house. Now this is sort of the main garden, and probably if you know my garden at all, this is probably the area you're most familiar with. So this border right here is where very soon it will be absolutely bursting in color, because all planted along the back here are tall dinner plate dahlias. And those of course haven't done anything yet, but all of this becomes kind of a riot of color once that happens. And then I fill in along here with a variety of annuals. Again, more Nicotiana, which probably you'll never find my garden without. And a variety of other things down at the bottom here, all of which sort of come together when those dahlias really come to life. The only perennials in this skinny little bed along the house here are a rose, and this rose is, these are just kind of over now, but this is Autumn Sunset Rose. And then if you look up, there's the beautiful Pearl d'Azur Clematis up there. It's a very tall growing Clematis, which makes it perfect for this trellis here. And I love how when you look up, you just see those flowers looking right at you. I do have a window box here, which is starting to come together here. You know, things are just starting to pull together. I grow vines up the bamboo poles. This year that's purple bell vine going up there, but I again like to take some height up. Our house is sort of tall and white, so I like to bring height to it where I'm able to. Along this side, we've got a variety of containers. I've got a kumquat here. I've got pepper. This is Senecio Skyscraper from the Southern Living Plant Collection, with some really fun little Corsican mint as almost like a ground cover to this pot, and it's got the tiniest little flowers in it. Just the most charming little plant there. And then over here, we've got a couple of figs. This is a Chicago Hardy fig, and this is a Miss Figgy fig, little Miss Figgy fig. And tomatoes, which need some staking, and peppers in this little planter here. Some sweet peas there. And just ignore the fact that there's no railing on our stairs right now. We're in the middle of replacing our stair railing, so there's no railing there right now, but normally there is. As you sort of circle around here, this area was just redone a few years ago, and you'll notice poppies all over the garden. Most of them have self-sown. I've sown some. I sow them right on the snow in winter, and it works great here. I think that the seed pods are maybe prettier even than the flowers, so I do leave many of them stand as long as I can, just because I think those little pods are so pretty. So this is where I plant most of the rest of my dahlias that aren't against the house. I think this year I grew maybe between 70 and 80 dahlias. Last year I did 100, and that was too many, so I cut back to 70 or 80. Many of them are planted in this garden. I try to plant things that don't get quite as tall in this garden, so that they can be more a part of the garden. Sometimes if you stick a 6-foot tall dahlia in there, it gets a little busy, but all kinds of things are packed in this garden. The nice little feathery plant in the back that I just love so much is Amsonia Hubrechtei, and in front of that we've got tiny tough stuff hydrangea, which we've got very alkaline soil here, so naturally would be pink. I do treat that to try to make it blue, and it doesn't always take uniformly, so you actually get this beautiful range of colors from deep blue to lilac to pink to any color in between. And then the dahlias in this area are just starting to open. So here's maybe my favorite dahlia right here, and the very first bloom of it. This is Crichton Honey. And all of the dahlias that are planted in this group right here are all Crichton Honey. So they will be this sort of beautiful peachy ball dahlia all along here. And then in the front of this bed, there's some other shrubs and perennials, of course, in the back here, but along the front is all annuals. So this is really a very colorful show that changes every year because I always plant something different here. Although this beauty right here, this is called Wild Magic Basil. It is a sterile variety, so you can't grow it from seed. So you have to buy it as a plant. But it gets huge and it gets these beautiful, beautiful purple foliage. Good to eat too, but also the flowers are just gorgeous on it. So I always grow that at the front of the bed because I quite love it. So this is probably the view that you see the most of my garden if you've ever seen it or you follow me on Instagram. And this is where we sit and this is where we enjoy the garden the most. So that's why I like to make this kind of the focal point. So as you come down the semi-weedy path here, we've got, we sort of continue this bed over here. We've got by the way, we've got a very big limelight right here, which has really become a focal point of this part of the garden. And over the years, it's sort of been limbed up to be almost a tree form. I didn't really intend for that to happen, but it's great that it did happen because it allows me to grow so much else below it. The corner of this garden is the first tree we planted in this garden, which is a serviceberry. I actually think it's the species. It's quite big and it's been having kind of a rough time the past couple of years. It's really suffered with cedar apple rust, which you can kind of try to treat it, but there's not really a good way to do that. But and then we can, we'll pop around and see those hostas in a second, but over on this side of the garden, I do love this path because there's so much going on both sides. This is a blue globe spruce. I do have 3 of them. They're sort of kind of rhythmically placed, and I do love that blue foliage in here. In this part of the garden, we've got all kinds of things. Again, annuals are going to fill in along this border here, but right now we've got the Stand By Me Clematis in here, which is probably stealing the show the most. It's just so beautiful. I love it. It's a bush clematis, so it doesn't vine. You just have to kind of support it to keep it more or less upright, and that's as tall as it'll get right there. Got a big columbine trying to seed all over the place here. But these are all, I think these are blue angel hostas. I planted them many, many years ago, but they just fill up this whole corner. Which I just love the look of that. Again, I have a clematis who climbs up and will eventually work its way up this tree. So it's Gravetie Beauty. So it blooms later in the year. And so later in the year I will have flowers blooming on this tree, and they are the clematis that's made its way up there. Back sort of on the path here, if you look at this from this area from overhead, basically what we have is a circle of grass over here, and then this is a sort of an oval that sits diagonally that the path runs through. So if you connect these two sides, it creates an oval. We've got another blue tree over here, which is Blue Magoo. And right now what's looking best in this bed is, well, first of all, this is Lauren's Grape Poppy, which is just the best. This is Midnight Masquerade Penstemon. There is a red poppy trying to pop in there. This is White Wands Veronica, which is just covered in pollinators right now. Such a beautiful plant, and I love it in this application. And it's a nice height for a plant too, for the front of the border. Now, even though it's the other side of the same path, there's less sun over here. So this bed is filled with mostly, sort of part shade type of things, including this maple, which is, I always forget the name of it. It is Moonrise. So this is Acer Shirazum Moonrise. Pretty young. I've only just put this in maybe 2 years ago. And then we've got lots of heucheras down here, a few hostas, things like that on that side. We'll just pause to take a peek at these two containers. Simple, really simple container here, just 3 plants. So this is Plectranthus Silver Shield. This is Iconia Upright Salmon Begonia, and then Dichondra Silver Falls draping out. And I think that's a lot of luck for 3 different types of plants only. So this border faces west. So there's not a lot of morning sun here. It gets hit with a bit of afternoon sun, although it's shielded from some trees we have here. So it's always interesting to see what'll grow in this area. But one of the things that grows really well is the climbing hydrangea here against the garage. Now that's growing on the north side of the garage, and it's just starting to cover that wall so beautifully. And now it's starting to come around the edge a little bit, which I'm fully in favor of. If it went over the top of the door and over to the pergola on top of the garage, that'd be okay with me. Okay, so now we're on the other side of the circle. So this is now, I'm looking east right now, and I've terraced these walls a little bit here. I actually built those terraced walls myself about 10 years ago now, and so that backs up to our deck where we hang out most of the time. And there's all sorts of things in here. This year, I've sort of made this a little bit of a tropical corner. So I put in some cannas in here. And I've just changed it up a little bit because once these poppies, I won't leave all these poppies to stand. So once those leave, it can get a little bare in here. A couple of notable plants in here. One of my absolute favorite Clematis right here. This is Sapphire Indigo. And it grows from there. I just let it drape over the wall, both directions, and it will bloom all year for me. It's just a real stunner in there. Then I have another Clematis doing the same thing over here. The name always escapes me, so I will have to look it up. But does the same thing. I love Clematis that can just kind of be left to meander around. I have some June hostas growing here. They're getting a little tattered right now from slug damage, but not so bad. I'm able to grow hostas here in more sun than a lot of people would be, and certainly like more sun than Linda would ever be able to grow a hosta, because our sun just doesn't get as hot here. So as we come around the corner, we've got some sort of crazy perennial geraniums here. I think it's Johnson's Blue. And then we come to the second set of stairs we have for our deck. These are Incredible hydrangeas, which are just starting to bloom now, and they will get, the flowers on these will get absolutely enormous. 17 inches across, in diameter is what I've measured some of them at before. We've got one on either side flanking it. And down here we have a Etoile Violet Clematis, one of my favorite Clematis, and one that I recommend to so many people. It's sulking a little bit here because, like I said, we've been putting in new deck railings, and I had to take it off the railing, and it didn't really go back on in a great way, but it sure is beautiful. Those flowers are stunning. So this is an example of just a tiny little corner that just came together so nicely for me. So this tree is Aurelia Silver Umbrella. It is a grafted form of Aurelia, and it's got variegated leaves on it. And it's happy here. It's been growing really well over on this side. And since our deck is raised quite a bit, it really helps tie the top of the deck down to here. And then I've just got, I think this is an autumn fern, a nice little Solomon seal down here that I picked up at a plant sale at a house, and I don't know the variety of, but it's really quite pretty. And some lamium for ground cover, and a couple of really big hostas in there. And I don't even know which ones these are. I think that's elegans maybe, and this might be like guacamole or something. I'm not even sure which ones they are anymore. Really simple, but grounds this corner of the deck and sort of, you know, makes it all make sense. And it's kind of just a nice little moment in the garden. So over here we've got, these are more poppies. These are ones I just sowed. You know, poppies come up by the million basically. So I'm enjoying it, although some of them will go. We'll keep the best looking seed heads here, the nice big fat ones, but the rest of them are getting a little floppy, so they'll have to get cleaned out a little bit. There's always a weed to be pulled around here. This is Spirea in here. This is blue kazoo. It's a favorite of mine, and it's finished flowering now, so I will cut it back to just shape it lightly. But it has this blue foliage, but also has some purple on it. Such a nice Spirea. If you don't know that one, that's one to look into. Now as we come this way, we're sort of, I did some rearranging in this bed, moved some hydrangeas around in here. And so this is another Incredible over here. And I have another hydrangea in here that's brand new this year, but I'm currently protecting it from deer to make sure it gets a good start. So I do deal with deer here. It's a big problem. I spray, as long as I can keep up with spraying deer, I manage them well. It's when I slack off or forget to spray that we end up with problems. And so I will uncage this guy shortly. But this is Haas Hollow hydrangea in here, which is a really beautiful one. And I hope he gets big, and I would add a lot more of him in here if he does well. But I didn't want to take chances with the deer. Over here, this is your basic Annabelle Hydrangea over here. I love Annabelle. I think she's great. She has filled up this whole corner and come around the corner, and I'm here for it. I love it. So this is what I consider my sort of hot border. My garden, as you probably noticed, has a lot of pinks and blues and chartreuse and white. And I wanted a place to put in really hot colors. So that's what I do. That's what I do over here. So this is where I put plants that are red and orange and whatever. This Clematis right here is Niobe, who's looking a little bit more purple than usual. Usually he skews a little bit more dark red. We've got kind of a mishmash of things in here. The big plants you see back here are monkshood, which of course will not bloom a hot color. Those will bloom beautiful steely blue, probably the last flower to bloom in the garden. And this little cutie right here is this is Golden Spirit Catinus smokebush, growing in a pot, completely inspired by Linda. If you guys have been watching Linda for enough years, you've probably seen when she had this in her garden. I believe she lost it this past year in those horrible storms that they had over winter. But I do love putting a pot in the middle of a garden. I think it just adds a dimension to a garden. So you will see pots stuck in my garden all over the place. So we've got several paths here that lead to the other side because we have a little creek that runs through, and this is one of them. They all lead to the same place, which is just the other side of the creek. But before we head over there and down my shade border, I just want to show you this side over here. So this is an Asian pear that's been espaliered against the fireplace here. And I've really edited this bed heavily this year. So we've got Tough Stuff hydrangea growing in front of it. We've got some lily that I don't remember being there that's bright orange, but more power to it for hanging in there. And then this year I replanted most of this bed to be almost all Calamintha nepeta Montrose white. There are some alliums in here. This one is a variety called Big Beauty, which is similar to Summer Beauty and Millennium, which will bloom soon. And then I've got some Sanguisorba in here as well, which has not bloomed yet. Those are all new this year. So this bed got a bit of renovation in it. And back here are the only two plants that I believe exist from what were here when we bought the house. And those are just two old-fashioned peonies that have bloomed, and I've cut them back to be a little bit more presentable there. But I believe that's all that remains from the original plants that came with this house. So depending on when Linda shows you this video, you might be seeing a part of the garden that other people have not seen yet. Because this year, this little bump out right here is new. I fixed the line of this bed. Most of this bed has been here for a long time, but the line of this bed has always bothered me, so I redesigned it this year to sort of mimic the circle garden. So that created this sort of big swoop here. This is Wolf Eyes Dogwood in the middle here. It will get very horizontal branching, which is what I want here. I don't want it upright. It will get to be very horizontal, but dogwoods sort of do that over time. And the back of this here is just mostly hostas. When I started this bed, I was a new gardener. I didn't have a big budget for gardening, and so I bought hosta plugs, and I just plunked them in. So most of these were grown from like 2-inch plugs over time. Now there are a couple of gems in here, and this is one of them. This is shredded umbrella plant, which is about to bloom here, but I just love the leaves on it. I think it's so great. We've got some toad lilies back here, which is a horrible name for a beautiful flower that doesn't look like much now, but in fall it will get little orchid-like flowers. We've got ferns, your basic shade plants in here, a variety of ferns and hostas and hellebore. A nice big patch of Canadian ginger here, which is a native here. Oof. And then this is where we also expanded that border, so I still have to sort of figure out this edge a little bit. But this is where we enter what I call the new garden. I guess I'll have to come up with a better name for that in a few years. This whole area was redone last year. And I'm thrilled with how it's developing, considering it's only a year old. I finished planting this on July 10th of 2020. And so everything you see here is been in the ground for basically a little over a year. So the sunshade situation is interesting here, but this is definitely shadish over here. As the farther you go towards the road, the more sun you get into there. Through here we've got astilbes, we've got blue, this is Carex flocka, blue zinger, a plant to research before you plant it, by the way, because it can get a little rambunctious. I'm pretty happy with how it's going here. These astilbes are just the best. Unfortunately, there's a lot more of them planted, but the deer seem to have gotten some of them. But the flowers on this astilbe are just primo. This garden features sort of mass plantings of some of the plants that I rely on the most. One of them being Geranium Macarizum, which grows in anything for me from full shade to full sun. It is really a miracle plant. It has bloomed, and so you can see it's spent blooms here. I don't mind those at all. Those will just fall off, so I don't even go in and deadhead it. And it's evergreen, so it's there all year, which is pretty great in a zone 5. These big guys, I don't know, can you get this all in? You might have to pan up to see that. I would conservatively say, let's see, is this twice my height? So I'm 5'2", and we think this is twice my height, so we think that's 10 feet. This is Thalictrum ellen. And up along this part of the path is Lady's Mantle, which these are the flowers on it. It's so beautiful. I'll cut these back soon, but I just love those dainty little chartreuse flowers on Lady's Mantle. This is one of my must-have, can't go wrong, easy plants that you don't have to mess around with or do anything with. As we walk across the bridge here, now we get into even more plants. So you saw some of the plants when we first started this tour over there. That's where we started. Now we're kind of weaving through that garden. This is a Nepeta whose name I can't remember right now. Along here we've got sort of all kinds of things. Here is, this is Sanguisorba lilac squirrel. And this is the first bloom on it this year. Isn't that just the cutest little fuzzy little pom-pom? I mean, you just can't go wrong with that. So this relies heavily on grasses here. So these grasses, grasses take time to mature. There's a lot of blazing star Leatris in here. So, or Leatris, however you say that. There's a lot of that in here, so that's about to take over. All of the deer have cut about half of them down for me. This side is the full shade bed underneath an oak tree and a big spruce. And I do need to get in here and do a little bit of weeding, but the main plant that's growing in here is Carex pennsylvanica. So this whole area will fill in with these Carexes at some point. So this will become a beautiful ground cover and suppress all those weeds that I have to keep an eye on right now. As we come this way, we've got some Echinacea Paleta, which I would say is probably my favorite Echinacea. It kind of goes a little Dr. Seussy. We've got some Caradonna salvia in here, which is finished blooming, and I will cut back here shortly. We've got the big plant that you see in the middle is Angelica Gigas, which is a biennial that I grow over by the garage. And I brought plants over last year and transplanted them over here because it does seed quite readily. And you don't need a lot of them, obviously. It will get a beautiful purple flower on the top of it that every insect in the world will be lined up to feed at. This is more of that Calamintha, Montrose White. This year I've planted amongst it some bottle gentian, which looks like nothing right now, but will get a beautiful blue flower on it. So they will bloom at the same time, so we'll have the beautiful frilly white of the Calamintha with the blue of the blue gentian, bottle gentian in there. Okay, so this is my dream vegetable garden, which I got 3 years ago. We built this vegetable garden, and I love this spot over here. And I love, I sort of knew that I was going to get one garden gate in my life, and so I got the garden gate of my dreams. So I actually had this garden gate built, which I love. We've just got simple boxwoods outside of here. So far, so good on those with the blight. This year, you'll notice the beautiful Clematis growing over the top. We planted those last year in the 2 containers that flank the doors here. And it's called Little Boss. And I love how the nodding bells just come over the top. So this vegetable garden is roughly 40 by 50 feet. We've got 8 4x8 raised beds and 4 2.5 by 5 raised beds in the center. And I grow all the vegetables that I love to eat in it. So in the front here, we've got a lot of lettuce and kale, mostly. Most of the lettuce is just about finished here. Then we go to 2 beds of tomatoes. And as we come in here, the center 4 small beds are all for cut flowers. And the centers of each of those are lovely, wonderful, delicious smelling sweet peas, which are certainly one of my favorite flowers. I grow those from seed every year, and they are the flower that got me started growing flowers from seed because it's very hard to find sweet peas growing. So you generally, if you want to grow them, you usually have to start them yourself. To me, there isn't a better scent on the planet than sweet peas. So these are just filled with random flowers. I use them theoretically for cut flowers, although I'm a little stingy about cutting them even for that. And then I've got a squash bed over here. This is all garlic over here, which will be probably be harvested we're just starting to think about harvesting 2 or 3 weeks probably would be my guess before that's ready. Over here I've got turmeric and ginger. Peas are finishing up. Beans are starting over there. And this is my herb bed. One of the things that I really like to do is to, especially since I'm growing in raised beds, is to plant in ways that are beautiful. So I've got patterns in here. So we've got these little Greek basils here, which will form sort of a basil hedge. And then we've got 2 different kinds of basil that'll form sort of a triangle, and the opposite on this side. This is Crimson King and Emerald Towers basils here. And then in the corners I put in my parsley and my dill and nasturtiums, and then at the back I've got cucumbers growing. So everything's just coming into its own. Along this back fence here, this is a project that I started last year. I am creating what is called a Belgian Fence, which is an espalier form out of Royal Raindrops crab apples. So the bamboo that you see are sort of the supports as it grows in, but it will become this crisscrossing essentially fence back here. And then I've just planted some Sonata Cosmos along the bottom to sort of brighten that area up, make that look beautiful. So of course this is all fenced with a 6-foot tall fence, which allows me to have this without having to worry about the deer getting in here, which is fabulous. But this is my stock tank pond. So I've had this since we started in here. This year I'm just growing, this is like a water clover, and this is a lotus, which I hope will be producing a flower one of these days. Nonetheless, I think it's exotic and beautiful the way it comes up. And this year, for the first time, I put fish in this pond. I've always resisted doing that, but a lot of people told me I was really missing out. So I've put in feeder fish in here, but they have done the best job of taking care of any mosquito larvae that gets in here, keeping it clean and algae free. And I do dye the pond water to make it nice and black with a non-toxic dye. So that's just kind of a fun thing that I do, because I believe that spaces in your garden can be beautiful and productive. I don't believe in drawing a line between the food that you want to eat and the flowers that you want to grow. I think everything can grow in harmony. And I think you can have a garden space that's naturalistic in one area and kind of formal in another, and sort of modern cottage in yet another. I don't think I just don't feel that you have to limit yourself in what you want your garden to be. So that's sort of my gardening philosophy. So thanks for coming along on this kind of longer tour of my garden, but it was really a pleasure to invite you all in and see what I'm doing here. And thank you so much, Linda, for sharing this with all of your great followers. And I hope you guys all have a great day in your garden. Take care.